They told her she was invisible now, that her name had been scrubbed clean, that no database would ever call her back. But when security officers at Kingsfield Air Base dumped her canvas bag onto the floor, mocking her oatmeal, her tattered journal, and the smooth cedar token tucked inside, they missed the weight of what they were touching. Until a young private unzipped a final pocket, and the room froze. What he held wasn't a weapon. It was a symbol. One whispered about in black rooms and locked servers. And suddenly, everything stopped. Footsteps, chatter, even the low hum of fluorescent lights. Because what they'd just found wasn't supposed to exist, and certainly not in the hands of a quiet logistics clerk. If stories like this still matter to you, stories about silence, dignity, and what power really looks like, go ahead and tap subscribe, drop your thoughts below, and share it. Somebody out there needs to hear this. The hallway smelled of scorched metal and burnt coffee. Naomi Hart walked slowly, shoulders squared, eyes down. Not from fear, but from habit. She moved through the security queue like vapor, unbothered, unimportant. That's how she'd stayed forgotten for almost 10 years. At the front of the line, she placed her canvas bag on the conveyor belt. Hands open, voice quiet. The scanner beeped once, then paused. A second beep, sharper. The private monitoring the screen leaned in, frowning. Something wasn't right. "Ma'am," he said, hesitant. "Do you have any undeclared metal items or electronics?" Naomi's tone was calm, almost apologetic. "Just personal items, tools, nothing restricted." He gestured toward the inspection table. She complied without protest. First came a spoon, a folded shirt, a travel mug. Then her notebook, soft with years. A cedar token the shape of a coin. The guard smirked, digging for more. Then came the zipper, the one she never opened unless absolutely necessary. He flipped it. A small black leather case landed on the table. Inside, a matte black emblem. A falcon, wings spread, clutching lightning in its talons. And just like that, the air changed. Naomi Hart had disappeared with intention. The way some women choose silence, not from weakness but precision. After 2 decades in operations where her name was never spoken aloud, she'd chosen obscurity, like others choose sanctuary. She didn't flee. She folded herself inward, took a desk in the back wing of Kingsfield's logistics annex, where dust fell evenly, and no one asked questions they didn't want the truth to. Every morning, she parked a sun-bleached sedan in the far lot, the one nearest the fence line where prairie weeds crept through chain-link gaps. Her path to the office wound past forgotten shipping containers and SATCOM dishes pointed at dead skies. She walked it in silence. Not because she feared being seen, but because she'd already mastered the art of being overlooked. Inside, her workspace was a windowless cube with green walls the color of hospital sheets and a soft hum from old air units. A single bulletin board held a rotation of memos no one read. She kept her badge on a lanyard, low, never flashed. For lunch, she stirred oatmeal into black coffee. Not for taste, but because sugar triggered memory flashes she'd long stopped trying to manage. Her life was clean, ordered, erased. But 3 things refused to vanish. The titanium tags she wore beneath her blouse, the cedar token in her wallet, its scent still faintly like Georgia dirt after rain, and the small, worn leather case zipped into her bag, the one with the emblem inside. She hadn't opened it in years. But she still carried it, just in case the world ever forgot too much. At 0600, the badge reader at Building 7 shorted out. Just a flicker of circuits, a static pop. Normally, it would have rerouted staff to the east gate, but a construction vehicle had clipped the access lane the night before. That left only one path open, West checkpoint, meant for weapons convoys and flight crews. Not logistics clerks, not Naomi. She arrived as dawn spilled orange light across the radar domes. Already, the line coiled like a restless animal, 50 people deep, boots tapping, shoulders slouched. The guards here wore mirrored glasses and smug authority, pacing with clipboards and voices just loud enough to remind you of your place. Naomi kept her head down, hands visible, movements measured. The private manning the scanner looked barely 20, acne flaring red beneath harsh fluorescence. When he reached for her bag, she gave it up without resistance. Canvas soft from use, corners frayed, the kind of bag no one would ever think to fear. He ran it through once. Then again, his brow furrowed. "Ma'am, something's showing dents, possibly metallic." Her voice, when it came, was quiet. "Just tools, personal items." He gestured her to the secondary table. As the bag opened, items spilled like artifacts. A travel mug, a folded tee, the cedar token. A notebook with creased pages and no title. The guard poked through, fingers awkward, then paused. He'd reached the final zipper. She watched without blinking as the leather case slid out, small, weightless, but commanding. He opened it. And the world snapped. Voices dropped. The radio stuttered. Even the buzzing exit sign dimmed, as if the air itself recoiled. One of the senior guards stepped forward, eyes locked on the emblem. A falcon, wings extended, talons curled around a bolt of lightning. He didn't speak right away, just inhaled. Shallow, controlled. Then, in a voice low but firm enough to cut the air, he said, "Nobody moves." The order came exactly 23 minutes later, carried in the chest pocket of a man who did not introduce himself. He stepped out of a black SUV with no plates, his boots too polished for anyone local, his uniform unmarked but unmistakable. He walked straight toward Naomi, with a calmness that felt like warning. No shouting. No chaos, just certainty. He handed her the envelope like it weighed nothing. But it did. She took it without a word, her fingers brushing paper thicker than standard issue. The seal was real. The signature? Redacted, but the emblem beneath was intact. Black Echo, bordered in crimson. Only one protocol used that version. Inside was a single slip of grey cardstock. No explanation. No apology. Just 5 words printed in matte black ink. Remission suspended. Report to Hangar 19. Effective immediately. Naomi read it once, then again, though the words hadn't changed. Her throat tightened, not with fear, but with the familiar pressure of something long dormant rising again. She glanced up. The man was already walking away, steps crisp against the concrete. No escort, no further instruction, just a return path that no one else could walk. She stood in place for a moment longer, envelope pressed to her chest, then exhaled slowly through her nose. Around her, the checkpoint resumed its rhythm, boots moving, radios chirping, guards shouting half-jokes, as if nothing had happened, as if her world hadn't tilted. But Naomi knew. Article 7 recall was no routine redeployment. It was a myth among operatives, the kind of protocol used only when something broke so deeply that only the forgotten could fix it. She walked back through the checkpoint alone. No one stopped her. No one dared. The young private who had opened her bag avoided her eyes now, as if he understood too late what he had awakened. Inside her canvas bag, the emblem had been returned to its pocket. Zipped, silent, but no longer dormant. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. She only moved forward. Because when the past calls you by name, clearly and without hesitation, you don't get to pretend you didn't hear it. The hangar waited like a held breath. Set at the far edge of Kingsfield, Hangar 19 hadn't been used in years, not for anything official. Its motion lights flickered from age, its exterior peeled from sun and wind. But tonight, every bulb hummed steady. The doors were open just enough to frame a silhouette, sleek, black, unmistakable. An aircraft Naomi hadn't seen in 13 years. It was a ghost, like her. As she approached, the air shifted, cooler, more alert, the kind of silence that only lives where memory walks ahead of you. Two figures stood beneath the wing. One tall, one compact, both dressed in matte black, without insignia or names. But she knew the shape of them before they spoke. The taller one stepped forward. A scar curved down his jaw, subtle but familiar. "Took you long enough," he said, voice low, gravel thick. "Still walking like you're casing rooftops." Naomi almost smiled. "Still leaning like you've got a knife in your boot." Old habits. He extended a gloved hand. She took it without hesitation. "Rashid," she said, more breath than sound. "Still breathing," he answered. The second figure moved from shadow, slender, older, wrapped in stillness. Her gaze met Naomi's without blinking. "Clara." "Naomi," she replied, not a greeting, more an acknowledgement. Her voice held the same strange calm it always had, measured, deliberate, slightly off rhythm, like a code you had to wait to decipher. They stood in a triangle of shared history. Once they'd answered to no flag. Once they'd disappeared without ceremony. And now they were here again, summoned by something too quiet to ignore. The jet behind them gleamed like a blade, and Naomi felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with the slow understanding that the life she buried was not content staying dead. "You know why you're here?" Clara asked. Naomi shook her head once. "Not yet." "You will," Clara said, then nodded toward the hangar. "Briefing's inside, and it's not going to sit easy." Naomi followed them in, the cold concrete echoing each footstep, like the past knocking once again. The jet didn't roar. It didn't need to. It was already awake. Inside the hangar, the world narrowed. Lights pooled in surgical white across the concrete, illuminating only what needed to be seen. No clutter, no wasted motion. Just a folding table with a single screen, and the aircraft looming silent behind it like a sentinel. Naomi stood still as Clara tapped the monitor. A satellite image flickered to life, grainy, washed in gray. Desert terrain, unfamiliar and familiar at once. In the center, a compound of low buildings circled by fencing, shadows long and sharp beneath a sun that left no room for lies. Rashid leaned in, arms crossed tight across his chest. 2 weeks ago, something came online out there, not military, not sanctioned, but recognizable. Clara zoomed in, a courtyard, one figure kneeling, two standing behind in asymmetric gear. But Naomi's eyes weren't on them. They locked on a small black object beside the prisoner, barely larger than a backpack. "That can't be," she muttered. "That program was buried. The units were destroyed." Clara's voice didn't rise. "It's a successor, same design, same interface. But this one's active and transmitting." Naomi took a step back. Her breath slowed. Her pulse didn't. "Who's running it?" "We don't know," Clara answered. "But whoever it is, they used your name to access the archive." Naomi blinked, once. "My clearance was sealed, which means it was opened," Rashid said. Clara reached into a folder beside the monitor and held up a dog tag. Black carbon, scorched at the edge. The code etched into it wasn't hers, but it was close. A backup alias, one she'd used once in a mission never documented. They pulled this off a drone wreck south of Kabul, Clara said, along with fragments from one of our birds. Naomi felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Someone hadn't just revived Black Echo. They were stitching it back together, piece by piece, using ghosts as blueprints. Clara turned back to the screen. They're not rebuilding it. They're hijacking it. Naomi said nothing. She didn't need to. The past was speaking louder than any of them. She landed under the cover of windless dark, the sand swallowing her boots without a sound. No radio, no countdown. Just a whisper in her ear from Rashid an hour earlier. You'll go in alone. They'll see more than one. Naomi moved like memory, low and deliberate, following the heat trail mapped from the satellite brief. The compound looked civilian from a distance. Mud brick walls, cluttered yard, even laundry lines. But up close, the symmetry gave it away. No civilian builds walls in perfect quadrants. She breached through a side panel near the generator. No alarm. No guards. Too easy. That was the first red flag. Inside, the courtyard matched the image. The box was there. Alone. Blinking red light, steady like a heartbeat. But the kneeling prisoner? Gone. And in his place, one woman stood silent beside the device. No weapon. No mask. Naomi raised her rifle, breath steady. Then she saw her face. Clara Royce. Same eyes, same calm. You, Naomi whispered. Clara didn't move. I told you it wasn't going to sit easy. You briefed me yesterday. I did. Naomi's finger didn't leave the trigger. That was you then. And this is you. How? Clara exhaled softly. They didn't send me. I sent myself. Naomi didn't lower the weapon. What the hell is this? They needed to see who would come back when called, Clara said. And you came. Naomi stepped closer. Slow. You used me. You planted that emblem. You put it in my bag. I knew you. You would have ignored the call, deleted the file, buried it deeper. But this made you look. Naomi's voice dropped to a razor's edge. You manipulated me. No, Clara said. I reminded you. The box hissed, a soft vent of heat, like breath escaping a sealed vault. You think I'm here for some righteous mission? Naomi said. No, Clara replied. You're here because they left you behind. We all were. This isn't redemption. It's exposure. Naomi stared at her. The silence stretched. And then Clara said the one thing that made her hands tremble. You didn't choose this, but you deserve to see how it ends. The first pulse rose like a low wave, invisible to the eye but heavy in the air. Naomi felt it in her chest before she understood it. The black box beside Clara blinked once, then again, then held steady. Clara didn't flinch. She simply turned toward the device and tapped a recessed panel. A quiet tone sounded. Short, flat, final. What did you do? Naomi asked, her voice no longer cold but stunned. Clara didn't answer. Not right away. She stepped aside and gestured toward a second screen Naomi hadn't noticed before. It flickered to life, lines of code racing upward, then freezing into still images. Satellite feeds, typed orders, field reports, names, coordinates, photographs, bodies, every mission, every cover-up, every disappearance Black Echo had ever executed, streaming in real time. You think we were ghosts, Clara said softly, but ghosts leave traces. We were scars. And scars remember. Naomi stared at the screen as her own face flashed across it. 5 years younger, entering a compound in Helmand province, 1 hour before it was leveled by a strike. No one ever claimed. "I never saw that footage," Naomi whispered. "No one was supposed to," Clara replied. "They wiped it, but we found pieces, logs, voice files, encrypted backups. We've been reconstructing them for years." The weight of it hit her like a cold wave. "This isn't a breach," Naomi said. "It's a broadcast." "To every node that ever buried us," Clara answered. Naomi turned toward the box again. The red light pulsed once more. She realized then, the emblem in her bag had been more than a symbol. It had been a trigger, a signal to awaken a machine built not for war, but for memory. "You're going to show them everything." "Not out of vengeance," Clara said. "Out of truth." Outside, the night remained still, but across the world, encrypted servers flickered to life. High-ranking terminals unlocked. Files once marked beyond top secret began to unravel line by line. In a room far from this compound, a general stopped mid-sentence as his own signature appeared beneath a liquidation order. Her name highlighted, her death signed, but never delivered. Naomi didn't move, didn't blink. She simply watched the past unfold, too slow to stop, too complete to deny. By dawn, the transmission had already reached its final node. The last archive mirrored, the last file sealed into public servers no firewall could contain. There would be attempts to bury it, reclassify, redirect, silence. But the truth had moved faster than protocol. It was everywhere now. And Naomi Hart, who once vanished without ceremony, now existed again in records too visible to erase. She didn't wait for confirmation, didn't need applause or confrontation. She stepped out of the compound the same way she had entered, silent, precise, unnoticed. The drone that had dropped her was already circling back, a low hum above the edge of the horizon. Rashid's voice crackled once in her earpiece. "Windows tight." "You good?" She answered with a single word. "Ready." The extraction was quiet. No spotlight. No questions. She boarded with only the clothes on her back and the emblem in her pocket. No one saluted. No one spoke. But in the cockpit, the pilot's eyes flicked toward her with something close to reverence before looking away again. By the time Naomi returned to Kingsfield, Hangar 19 was locked. Not guarded, just sealed, like whatever had lived inside it no longer needed a place. In the annex, her chair stayed tilted slightly, as if someone meant to return, but never quite did. But no one came to ask where she'd been. No emails. No clearance review. No reprimand. Just silence. A week later, the West checkpoint was dismantled. Official memos called it an infrastructure update, but those who'd been there the morning her bag was opened knew better. The guard who had unzipped that final pocket was reassigned without warning. Others followed. Nothing was said aloud, but something had shifted. Not in laws, not in orders, in behavior. Young officers paused longer at classified doors. Older ones stopped scoffing when a woman stepped into a strategy room. Conversations grew more careful. Quiet acknowledgements passed without words. Not fear, awareness. Naomi never reclaimed her title, never gave interviews. She didn't need to. In some quiet way, her existence had already done what no mission ever had. It reminded the system that some names don't vanish. They wait, and when the moment comes, they return. There was no ceremony, no medals, no final debrief behind glass. Just a morning 3 weeks later, when Naomi Hart stood alone at the edge of a field, wind moving slow across the prairie, the base far behind her, and the world suddenly wider. She carried nothing but her bag, the same one they'd emptied on cold steel, the same one they'd stared into like it held a bomb. Now it held only silence. At the bottom of the bag, beneath the folded shirt and worn notebook, lay the emblem. Black falcon, red border, still warm from memory. Naomi held it in her palm, then closed her fingers gently, not to hide it, but to feel its weight. Not of power, but of truth. She had not burned the system. She had only opened the doors and let the light in. Across the world, the story was already fading beneath louder headlines. Some called it a cyber incident. Some, a whistleblower hoax. Others dismissed it as propaganda. But those who knew, truly knew, didn't argue. They adjusted. They changed passwords. They reconsidered orders. They watched who they overlooked. In Berlin, an aide hesitated before signing off on a covert approval. In D.C., a junior officer paused when filing an unsanctioned loss report. And somewhere in Brussels, a family received a packet in the mail, dog tags, a photo, a letter never meant to be delivered. No explanation, just closure. Naomi never returned to her old post. Her desk remained empty. Some say it was locked out of respect. Others say no one wanted to sit where a ghost had risen. But what mattered most wasn't where she went. It was what she left behind, not fear. Not revenge, not spectacle, a shift. And for those who watched closely, that shift lingered. In the way silence followed her name. In the way someone now hesitated before treating another like they didn't matter. Some stories don't end with noise. Some end with someone choosing not to vanish. Not for attention, not for glory, but because truth once seen asks to be carried. If you're still here, ask yourself this. What would you have done in her place? And if her story stays with you, share it. Because someone out there still thinks they're invisible. And they need to know they're not. So if you've ever walked through the world unheard, let her story remind you. Being unseen isn't the same as being powerless. And if her silence speaks to yours, share it. Let someone else feel seen too.